Hey everybody, I figured I would put together a video on data log reviewing and in between rounds. This is for drag racing applications. So I was just going to give you an overview of how I go about looking at data after making a pass and coming up with a decision for the next pass. So what I'm going to do is kind of show you, this is the last run that my personal car made, and just kind of some things to look for, kind of how to navigate a little bit better through data logs and whatnot, and how to make a better informed decision. So I have to preface this with, my car has an unbelievable amount of data on it. So this isn't me trying to sell you on adding data to your car, adding sensors or whatever to your car. This is more so just being able to show you how I go about doing things, and maybe it'll help somebody else in the future. So the first thing you do, you've downloaded it from the ECU. So let's just assume that we just downloaded this global file from the ECU, and we want to, kind of the first few things before I even look at a data log is I kind of spot check a couple things. One, does the learn table have a bunch of huge values in it? I use learn. A lot of people don't use learn, but I limit learn, pretty tightly, but I like to use it because it's an easy spot check tool if kind of out in left field with your fuel map. But then again, if you're out in left field with your fuel map, then you shouldn't be racing the car anyway. So everything's real small here, so I'm fine with this, So what we would do is we'd go to data log, and we go to open data log. I've already got it open. So this is the data log that matches the global file. So notice that up here, I named it vert ss pass 3, and if we look here, vert pass 3 shady side, that's the global file that this log belongs to. And if we look, vert pass 3 shady side. So this is an easy way for you to keep track of your data logs, because if you're anything like me, you've probably got a couple thousand of these things on your computer. But if you're just working with just your own car, it's good to keep track of dates and times and locations as to where you were racing, so that you don't get confused and grab the wrong log by accident. So always go in there and rename it. So when you open up the data log, you would go into File, Save As, and then just name it to match what you see down here. So all right, so let's get to it. So the first couple of things that I look at when I'm looking at, so this is a turbo application, but what I'm looking at is I typically will look for large swings. If there's any large swings in air fuel, it's pretty common to have a pretty large swing in air fuel at the release of the button, especially when you are, cutting spark, and then removing a whole bunch of timing from the engine when you're on the trans brake. So the first thing is, let's just look at what's our tune-up look like getting up onto the brake, right? How does it look? So if you notice, I've got a 0 marker here, and the way to achieve that, click up here, automatically set 0 time. I just use when boost time is greater than 0.00. So the moment it goes to 0.01, which is the release of the button, then we have our 0 marker, so we can look at everything in time. So hit cancel. But so anything, all these negative numbers here are while you're on the trans brake, and all these positive numbers here are after the release of the trans brake. So if you're looking at your time scale down here, I mean, you can do some math and just, I know I let go of the button at 5.5 seconds or whatever, but this is just a little easier. So anyway, so let's bring up boost when we're first looking at this. So it took right here, a buddy of mine was driving the car, and he likes to lazily roll into the throttle, which is perfectly fine. So it took right around 3 seconds to get to the chip. And then, right here, we're at minus 1.3. We started right around minus 6.3. So 5 seconds from an idle, and we've got our target boost, which was 10.2 pounds. So it made 10.2 pounds in that amount of time, in 5 seconds. And, it sat on the brake for a second here, waiting for the light to drop, second and a half, or 1.33 to be specific, until the light goes, and then you let go of the button. So what I'm going to do here is use the right arrow, and if we look up here in RTC, the runtime counter, you'll notice that we're at negative 0.02, negative 0.01, 0.00. Okay, this is the release of the trans brake button. So the first thing I typically do to just see if we've got maybe an issue with something is I like to zoom in to there. Go back to our 0.00. That was lucky. I typically can never click exactly where it's supposed to be. We click at our 0.00 mark, and then if you notice this purple line, this is the x-axis G meter that's in the VPS. So when we look at that purple line, I'm going to use the right arrow here, and I'm going to tab over. And notice 0.06, the car hasn't even moved. Okay, so it has not even, the car has not even begun to leave the line, right? So some guys get really hung up on why didn't my boost curve or why didn't my drive shaft, whatever it may be. Notice this car hasn't even begin to budge. I mean, 0.06, you let go of the button, but the trans brake still has to react. It still has to load the gear set. It has to load the drive shaft. It has to do a lot of things, load the tire, through the ring and pinion, and then load the tire before it's actually going to move the car. So the car has not even begun to move. Now, when we start climbing up here, now we get into the 0.45 Gs, 1.42 Gs. Now the car's moving, okay? So the car's actually left the line, right around here, that 0.07. So understand that this is not your zero point is not exactly where the car left the line or, where it broke the beams. So the VPS is fantastic for G meter information. I highly suggest them to put, on every car that we do, that we work with. I'm a big fan of the VPS, but if you don't have a VPS and you have a G meter, the G meter is probably one of the most important things that you can use to tune the car as far as making it go faster. So after we've done that, it starts to move, and we notice down here that we've got a little bit of a dip in air fuel. So my target was 3.9. It dropped to like 3.5, and then it recovered quickly. So, if we look, closed loop compensation is pulling 5%, current learn's pulling out 2%. We're removing 7% fuel to get that back into the realm as to where we want to be. So if we know, let's just say that this run here went 115 60 foot, right? Or 120 60 foot for an easy number, right? And we want to speed that up. Well, what we do is we take that 0.07. Remember, we didn't get any movement. I got lucky again there, by the way. We didn't get any movement until 0.07, right? And let's just say we went 120 to the 60 foot. So let's go 1.27. There's the end. That's where the 60 foot cone is, and close relation, right? It's not exact, obviously. So if we want to look at increasing 60 foot data, or getting a faster 60 foot, let's zoom in and look at just where the 60 foot is. So the first thing we'll notice is this is the boost curve, right? So we can, we can glance over that. Did it do kind of what we were anticipating it to do, right? And another thing, I hate to keep bouncing around, but if you don't know how to enable all this stuff, you just click E for edit, and you can build as many views as you'd like, right? You can name them whatever you want, and you can build as many views as you'd like. So so that way you can tab through a bunch of different views. So if we're going to go into boost tuning, let's tab over and get to boost tuning. So let's get rid of these. So here's dome, and here's target boost, right? So the first thing you want to do is make sure that they're scaled the same. So they are, minus 10 to 70, minus 10 to 70. So let's get a little bit better resolution there. Let's go target boost of a total of 40, right? So we can see it a little bit better, and change this scaling for dome pressure to 40. So let's quickly glance at, did it follow our curve? So here's the release of the button right there. And Well, here's where we release the button right there, right? 0.00. And did it follow our curve? So our dome pressure is following our curve, right? A little bit of movement here, but again, it's pretty much laying on top of it. You know what I mean? If we look, we had 17 pounds of dome pressure with a 16.4 target, so it's following the curve pretty well, right? So that's the first thing that we can just kind of spot check. Hey, did I command 20 pounds of dome pressure, but we only had 10? I mean, that's a blatantly obvious thing to start looking at, So get that out of the way. Again, we're all working on the 60 foot here, right? Because our 60 foot is going to be somewhere in this neighborhood. So we can spot check that dome pressure versus target boost, right? So we can ditch dome pressure. We know it's good. We got target boost. And then let's look at actual boost pressure, right? So there's actual boost pressure. So what I'm looking at here is I see that actual boost pressure is 10.0, right? So I wanted to leave right around 10 pounds of boost, 10.0, 10.1. So we let go of the button. Look up here, right? There we go. We let go of the button right at 10.1 pounds of boost. Now, if we just start hitting the right arrow, moving, notice it takes a second here for it to start accelerating, right? So this tells me we're at 0.1. Let's look at what our boost curve looks like. So we'll go here, go back into our global file, click the boost ICF, click boost versus time. Well, 10.0 was at 0.0, 11.9 was at 0.20. Okay, so when we've got, this is some people may like glance at this from a distance and say, well, that's pretty aggressive. Well, not really. One, this is all in at 1.6 seconds, and we've only got 25 pounds of dome pressure in it. So it's a very lazy tune-up that's in this thing, right? But we're going to accelerate in 0.2 seconds. We're asking the turbo to go from 10 to 11.9 in 0.2 seconds. That's not a very dramatic change in dome pressure. So would we really expect boost by here to be a rocket ship? Not really. You know what I mean? So if we let go of the button and immediately put 30 pounds of dome pressure in it, you also wouldn't expect it to follow that curve because it's unrealistic. You just didn't leave on enough boost to begin with. So that's the next thing I kind of spot check, right? So like, was it very lazy down here? So if you let go of this is my personal car, so I know, I know this thing really well. This car, it's got an 88 millimeter on it. It's X275 legal. It's 3,150 pounds. It's a 400-inch engine. So this thing wants to leave on more boost, okay? Because the turbo just does not want to respond extremely efficiently, right? So whenever you see a big lull like this, when you let go of the button, and this isn't a big lull. This is actually very, very small. You get what I'm getting to here. You understand that you just did not leave on enough boost. Now, if you feel like you're traction limited because, hey, I can't leave on more than 5 pounds of boost or whatever, it's going to spin the tires, you probably need to look at the chassis unless the car's already going like, 102 60 foot. So if you're in a no prep situation, I don't know, talk to somebody who does no prep stuff. I don't do that. So, but anyway, so we just kind of watch and see, hey, did the turbo light off hard when I let go of the button? Well, this did it exactly as I would anticipate. It followed the curvature the way I would anticipate it, right? So we know that our dome pressure is doing what we wanted it to do. The turbo acted the way we would expect it to do. So now let's look at a couple other things, right? So let's look at, there we go. Let's look at ignition timing, right? So did I do anything fancy with ignition timing here? No, I did not. So all this is doing is it's removing timing based off of boost pressure. There's nothing going on with a timing retard, right? So if you had a timing retard for, say, the first 0.5, into the run, it would effectively pull timing out of the engine to slow the tire down a little bit so that it didn't spin the tire. So we know that that's not the case here. Maybe we might have, in a different scenario, you could say, why did the thing slow down? Oh, well, it's because I left the timing retard on and I didn't anticipate leaving it on. So that's another thing that you can spot check here is just, always look at your ignition timing. I like to set up a lot of different views on things because the more views you have, the easier it is to roll through back and forth and make a decision based off of quickly, in between rounds. So I do one for fuel tuning. This is Drag Race 2. So some of the stuff that's from Drag Race 1 is in here. Some of the stuff that's in the chassis is in here. Track temp is in here. So the more views you have, the easier it is for you to kind of make a decision as to what you want to do. So we'll go back to Drag Race 1 because this is the one that always auto-populates, right? So this is the one I look at first. So our timing didn't do anything out of the ordinary, and maybe this is a bad example because this thing ran within 2 numbers of what I anticipated it to run. So, but it does give you a good idea as to what to look for. And again, don't be afraid to spend a little bit more time than you normally would just to look over this type of data, because if you're racing a turbo car, especially, the 60 foot is what makes or breaks these cars. I mean, you're not going to be able to keep up with a nitrous car if you're going 128 60 foot when they're going 104. You're not going to outmile an hour unless they are very slow for their combination, and or you're just unfairly racing. You're just not in a class or a group of cars where you can just literally steamroll people on the back split. So we look at that. When we let go of the button, again, like I said before, we've got a little bit of a dip in air fuel, but it comes back together, nice and clean. So there's no gripe there for me. I'm not complaining about that at all. If you've got a big swing in air fuel where it's just dumping a ton of fuel and you wonder why the G meter is down, well, that's why. I mean, this thing's big rich. So once we've kind of, divvied through everything that we wanted to look at in the 60 foot, let's look at the rest of the run. So we can do that by clicking zoom out, right? And there's the rest of the run. If you notice, there's a bar down here. You can slide. And then we've got way too much run data here that we don't really care about too much. So let's left click and hold, drag, and highlight just the run. So this is something that I see a lot of people mess up. Like I've seen many a time where I've got somebody looking at a data log like that. That sucks. This is dumb. Don't look at your data log like this, right? Zoom in, look at it, so you can actually see what you're doing, So, and make it as zoomed in as you want. Again, we just looked at the 60 foot. If you want to look at it to the gear change, do that. You can look at it as many different ways as you want. Anytime you get kind of in a corner and go, man, I zoomed in too far, just click zoom out. And you can use, if you use a mouse, like I use a mouse, you can use the roller ball and you can scroll. So if you don't use a mouse, you can just, use this and slide it, whatnot. So after we have finalized, okay, this is a 60 foot, did what we wanted it to do, what we start looking at now, or at least what I start looking at, the next thing is, where did the converter flash to? Now we could see where the converter flashed to in the 60 foot, but it's a little bit easier to spot it when you can look at the whole run, okay? So the converter flashed right to 7,000 RPM. If your converter flashes to like 5,800, you're probably going to be fighting the car a lot. It's because it drops it right into peak torque and it wants to either spin or wheelie or cause problems. But anyway, this converter flashed right to 7,000 RPM. So why did the converter flash to 7,000 RPM? Let's take a look at converter pressure. So there's converter pressure, right? So converter charge pressure. So while we're on the trans brake, it's making 80 pounds of pressure, okay? There's a regulator on it. There's also some dump valves on it. But if you look at the dump valves, 23 PSI while we're on the trans brake, and then the dump valve shut right here, 6.1 pounds of boost. And then the next dump valve shuts at 7, right? So there's the dump valve, the second dump valve shutting, and we get a little bit of a spike to 100 PSI, and it comes back down to the regulated pressure right around 80 pounds. So what we're looking at, though, is we want to see, converter flashed where we anticipated it to. Yes, in this scenario, it did. If this converter flashed to, say, 5,800, maybe the converter's too tight. Maybe it's got 200 pounds of charge pressure and you're about to knock the thrust out of the motor. But, as we're looking this over, we're seeing this go to about 125 pounds of converter charge pressure, which is what I would anticipate. So the converter did what we were anticipating it to do. We got rid of converter charge pressure, because that's a whole nother video on its own. And then, so the converter flashed to right around 7,000 RPM. Now, if you notice when we click on this, it highlights it'll highlight whatever you're closest to, right? So like I'm not clicking exactly here on boost, but I'm not clicking right here on G meter, but it's highlighting whatever the line is that you're closest to. So right now we're on RPM. So if we look, this is a perfectly straight line. So a lot of people get hung up on this, right? Hey, it flashed real high, but then it dropped. So if we're looking at the flash of 7013, 7018, 7,469, so look, so we're dropping RPM here, so people think that this is a big problem, right? And in a way, it kind of is a problem. We've dropped almost 200 RPM after the flash point. But in my opinion, what this is telling me is that this converter wants more power, right? So if we look, you can see that the converter just wants more power, right? So why is it that the G meter peaks at like 2.47 G, right where the converter starts to couple? Well, this thing wants more power. It wanted to accelerate further. So a lot of people just look at this. They look at, hey, we've shifted this thing at 8,000 RPM or 8050, and then it dropped down here to 6,928 RPM. So it dropped, almost 1,100 RPM on the shift. Oh, my converter's too tight. This is, what happens. And the guy who builds all the converters that we use and recommend and sell, Cameron and Byron Raven, they would say, the converter's not too tight, give it more power. I know for a fact guys like Dusty Bradford have put up a lot of good content, pictures and whatnot, showing, the differences between converters and changing stators and whatnot. I'm not trying to pitch a converter sales to you because it's literally like black magic to me, in my opinion. I just know how to use them, right? So like I know how to look at the data and understand what it wants. And in my opinion, right here, this thing wants more power. Well, why would it want more power if it flashed so high? Well, we know because it's dropping RPM, so the converter's coupling and laughing at the amount of power that we're throwing at it, right? And we also know that it's dropping a bunch on the shift, a little bit more than I like. And, it's right here, like this whole area from here to here is literally just begging for more power. It's just holding the engine back on, like, I'm not going to let you go until, we get a little bit more power. Now, notice once we get the boost in the engine, we got 36 pounds of boost in the engine, now it starts to accelerate, right? So now the engine is starting to accelerate. And then we drop, which still 36 pounds boost, or whatever, 35, whatever it may be, it's still wanting more power, right? So if this boost was in the engine back here, where it should have been, right, this thing would have dropped, checked, and accelerated earlier. Now, the shift point is all the way out here at 2.6 into the run. Now, remember, subtract your 0.07, from when the car actually moved, but it's way out here in the run. So the reason this is looking the way it's looking like is because this was literally, it's labeled pass number 3, but pass number 1 was just run it to the 60-foot, make sure the car went straight and didn't hit a wall or do anything dumb because, well, we did an alignment on it ourselves, so who knows what was going to happen. So pass number 2 was a little bit less power. Let's just make sure it goes straight. It continues to stop. Nothing stupid happens. And then pass number 3 was, I'm going to give it a little bit more power. So some of you guys might be looking at this and going, oh man, 35 pounds of boost, yada, yada. That's irrelevant, right? So that doesn't really matter. The boost number doesn't really matter. This was this was a lower power run. Something some people are missing is that it's only got 11 degrees of timing in it, and this is a small block Ford. So it's down on power, and it's down on power because I wanted it to be down on power. So look at your RPM trace. Your RPM trace can teach you a lot about what the car actually wants. So we know from right around 1.9 to 0.79, it wanted more power. So So anyway, look at your data and, kind of use what's in front of you, and it'll teach you a lot about, how to get the car to go faster. So anyway, hopefully this helps. I think I'll make another video on doing comparisons as well, but that'll be next. So, all right, see you.